As the insider-exclusive investigative news team travels across America producing the Justice in America Network TV series, we invite you to join us as we uncover real stories about the issues that promote justice and fairness for injured people, safeguards victims' rights, and the opportunity to help guide the hands of justice, especially when people's lives have been destroyed, families ruined, dreams lost, or widespread societal change and reform are needed. These true stories about real, ordinary people, their real lives, always up close and personal, and always unfiltered stories of unimaginable pain, suffering, and great wrongs, but also of courage and faith and the dauntlessness of the human spirit. These stories are also about the trial lawyers who helped these ordinary people navigate a very complex legal system to get justice as they faced extreme life-altering adversities, and how the government and big business with their million-dollar PR campaigns are slowly eroding our rights to seek justice and making an end run around the civil justice system. Our TV stories show relief and vindication for shattered lives and seemingly lost souls. The compassion, warmth, love, and determination of the human spirit found within these shows are neither imagined nor contrived. They are truly personal crusades and telling journeys of what it means to seek justice in the American courtroom. In this insider-exclusive network TV special, Justice in America, The Truths and Myths of Tort Reform, we visit with Joe Bruno, managing partner of Bruno & Bruno. Some of these same trial lawyers have been in the crosshairs of attacks by so-called tort reform advocates for the past 30 years. These attacks are not new. Now, a lot of you have heard and read about tort reform, but really don't understand how or what it really means, or how it affects us negatively every time we walk into the courtroom. So in this special Network TV Insider exclusive documentary, Justice in America, The Truths and Myths of Tort Reform, we will show you how tort reform is making justice more and more difficult for the average American. And we're not going to do it by words or fancy language, but by inviting you along to meet our guests and their lawyers in small towns and big cities filmed across America, who've had the unfortunate bad luck to be severely injured or victimized by big businesses, the government, or law enforcement. These victims could be you or me one day, and if you are so unlucky, you will quickly find out that justice in America is a hard-won battle where very few companies and individuals do the right thing, and you need trial lawyers who wage a battle with their own financial resources to get their clients justice. But before we get started, just for the record, let's define what the heck tort reform means in simple language. Tort is a legal term describing the system of compensation used by the courts to assign remedies, awards, and damages for harm done by one party to another, be it to their person, property, or other protected interest. Tort law defines what constitutes a legal injury and establishes liability. It's the civil court's answer to criminal law. Tort reform, then, is the political term for the controversial issue of reducing tort litigation, awards, damages, and/or compensation. Now, tort reform isn't one single idea or law. Instead, it's a group of ideas and laws designed to change the way our civil justice system works. While each tort reform law is different, they all share one or more of the following goals: to make it more difficult for injured people to file a lawsuit, to make it more difficult for injured people to obtain a jury trial, and to put limits on the amount of money injured people receive in a lawsuit. Keep in mind that throughout history, our civil justice system has kept Americans safe by allowing them a fair chance to receive justice when they are injured by the negligence of others, even when it means taking on the most powerful corporations. When corporations and their CEOs act irresponsibly by cutting corners on safety, producing unsafe products, polluting our environment, or swindling their employees and shareholders, the last resort to hold them accountable is in our courts. The legal system provides justice to those injured by deliberate misconduct and deters future misconduct by holding wrongdoers accountable. Joe Bruno, our featured lawyer, has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in New Orleans, in Louisiana, and across the nation. He and his firm continue to fight valiantly to get justice for the many innocent and hardworking people victimized by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the bureaucrats, and the politicians. His goals, not only to get justice for the people of New Orleans and Louisiana, but to make sure that all Americans are treated with equal respect and dignity as guaranteed under the Constitution of the United States. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from New Orleans, Louisiana. It is my great pleasure once again to be at Joe Bruno's office. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
We are here today to talk about one of your least favorite subjects.
Oh, yeah.
And we want America to know about tort reform. What is tort reform and what's wrong with it, and what do most Americans need to know what it isn't?
Well, let's start by framing the issue in the context of an issue about which most folks have heard. To me, believing that there's a need for tort reform is akin to believing that there is no climate change. Mm-hmm. It is that dramatic. It is that obnoxious. In the face of overwhelming evidence of all that's right and good about a system of justice, which requires people who cause damage to others to fairly and appropriately compensate them, is just mind-boggling. The bottom line here, and it's a very simple bottom line, it's about greed, and it's about power. And you see it if you are participating in the legislative process, if you go to your legislative hearings, if you go to Baton Rouge here, and you listen to the conversation, and you try to understand what it is they're trying to accomplish, and you realize this just doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. You have to credit the Republican publicity machine, because in using the word reform, before you start, right, you have the view that this is something better.
Well, first of all, when you say the Republican spin machine, they have names called the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. On the surface of things, it looks like a group of businesses that are helping people and helping each other.
Yes.
But that really isn't the case, is it?
Not, and again, I can give you another perfect example. Happened in Baton Rouge, where our capital is, I hope, just this past week. Mm-hmm. There were lawsuits filed against the oil industry, and I'm going to say in general, but obviously they named a variety of oil companies. In the past, the oil companies would come to the swamp, dig out the swamp, put their oil wells down, take the oil, go home, and leave the canals. Now, what that did was allow salt water to intrude into the swamp, killed the grass, killed the trees, which, wouldn't you know it, happened to be a natural protection against surge, which is the damage that's caused by a hurricane.
Right.
Now it's gone.
Right.
So lawsuits have been filed to say, hey,
put it back.
Put it back.
The way it was.
We're not asking you, just make it the way it was.
Yeah.
Okay. And by the way, we're not even asking you to pay 100% of it because we recognize there are other things that are going on here. But at least let's have a dialogue. Let's come to the table. So we have legislation sponsored by the National Chamber of Commerce to simply outlaw the lawsuit. In other words, before you start, we're gonna take away your right to file a lawsuit. Now, here's the most interesting thing: the local chambers of commerce are fighting the National Chamber of Commerce. Why? Because we live here.
Yes.
Okay?
Right.
This is where the hurricanes happen. This is where the surge comes. This is where the jobs are lost if we lose that so important infrastructure. And by the way, it happens to be the gateway for all the oil to come to this country in the first instance. So it's another example of the short-sightedness that, interestingly enough, always seems to accompany greed, because you want the money so badly. Your knee-jerk reaction is, let's do this. Let's just, let's whatever it may be, without thought. And fail to consider the consequences, and more importantly, fail to even ask the question, am I going to get what I want? And you're not going to get what you want. I mean, oil companies fight lawsuits all day long, every day. This is not something new to them. If they're right, they're going to win. If they're wrong, they're going to lose. And the likelihood is, given the political climate that we're in, you're never going to get fully compensated anyway. Yeah. So to me, I find it to be nothing more than a complete joke.
Right. On the surface of things, businesses want to reform the judicial system.
Yes.
So that the odds are stacked in their favor.
Precisely.
Even if it means to the detriment of the common everyday person, which is 300 million Americans.
Exactly.
Correct?
Another example. Another tort reform bill. Again, this 2 weeks ago in the legislature. Some bright Republican guy decides, if we have a jury trial for every single case, that's good. That's tort reform. Right now the law says, well, the case has to be worth more than $50,000 before you intrude on the lives of everyday citizens, take them from their jobs, cause them to lose money at work. So it has to be worth a little something. But no, the Republicans and their ilk say, let's require a jury trial for every single case.
Are we looking to bog down the system?
Well, hello. So why did they lose? Because every judge, every clerk of court,
they'd be working to death,
who came to the legislature and testified. You know what's so ironic about this? Because it's John Q. Businessman who calls me, Judge so-and-so, and says, can I get my employees out of jury duty because I need them at my job, at my workplace, to manufacture the widgets or whatever to make money, to pay my employees, et cetera. So perfect example, okay, of giving it the label tort reform when in fact it would never in a million years accomplish anything but hurt.
Yeah, and it's reforming the justice system to benefit one party,
businesses,
party, not individuals.
Yeah, I mean.
Now let me talk about something, because you mentioned to me there was a bill in the legislature. There's bills in Congress that are supposed to reform things because there are myths. For example, trial lawyers are just filing lawsuits to get rich, right?
Right.
And they're filing frivolous lawsuits. We can go into later on exactly how untrue that is. But we are looking at a system right here where legislation is passed, and one of the reasons it's passed is the public is uninformed about the consequences. What this show is designed to do is to inform the public about what you can do, what you should do, what's happening to you. Let me give you an example. There was a recession in 2008.
yeah.
Banks caused it. As a result of that, because they were too big to fail, there was legislation passed to prevent any future calamities. It was called the Dodd-Frank bill. Mm-hmm. Banks didn't like it. 4 years later, that was in 2010 that it was passed. 4 years later, that bill now has had a series of amendments added to it, excluding almost all the trading activity that the banks got themselves in trouble in the first place, right, so that the bill right now is totally neutralized. How that happened is the public is unaware of it. And we see the same thing. I mean, how long have you been practicing law?
I've been 35 years.
So in the 35 years, kind of give us a little perspective of how the law has changed against the individual because of tort reform.
Well, what we saw back in the day, first of all, it wasn't really called tort reform back then. It was just simply, we need to level the playing field.
Yeah, and that was started by the way by the tobacco companies.
Well, yeah, well, that's a whole other story, and we can talk about that for a minute, because what is truly amazing about that whole example of the tobacco industry comes in and files a bill that says, well, you ought not be able to sue for sugar or salt or water. Those are things that come from the earth. And tobacco too. So the bill looks like it's a healthy alternative, and buried in all the words is the fact that, well, we want to ban now, outlaw any litigation about tobacco. The gun lobby. I mean, if there ever was a bigger, more insanity in the world, I will just, as an aside, say to you that one of the truly amazing things about my business, my job, is that I get to see things that most people don't see. You talked about education, you talked about knowledge, right? Well, I mean, I have had the chance to crawl around the bottom of a 700-foot ship in the double bottom underneath 5 stories of steel in a shipyard. I've crawled over the chemical plants after it's blown up. I've learned about how cigarettes are made. So I get access to information and see things that most people don't see. And when you see and you understand, you go, oh my God, this is absurd. Mm-hmm. Absolutely absurd. And so we learned, for example, in the case of the cigarette industry, that they knew that cigarettes cause cancer, not yesterday, not last week, but in 1958.
Yeah. When we're talking about sharing the cost, one of your favorite subjects in Louisiana, medical malpractice, and how tort reform has changed the rules. I think since 1975, wasn't it? How they've changed the rules, and more importantly, when a doctor who's negligent because of his negligence or incompetence creates a situation where a patient becomes a quadriplegic.
Right.
The amount of money that person can get is limited to what? $500,000.
$500,000.
It costs more money to take care of that person for the rest of their life. Who pays it?
We do.
The taxpayer.
Exactly.
And who should be paying it? The person who caused the problem.
Precisely.
Right?
And the other side of this issue that you don't see is the enormous cost. Now, I'm not talking about, people automatically assume when you talk about medical costs, you're talking about how much the doctor takes home, right?
Yeah.
Not the case. When you see how much money is being made by hospitals and the institutions that buy hospitals. And this interesting thing that goes on where doctors own interest in hospitals and they get to send their patients to that hospital. And so through the referral and their ability to refer, they become as important a commodity as the hospital itself.
Yeah. They're making more money making money other than practicing medicine, correct?
Absolutely. It's amazing. And then you see how much money is paid for a company that does nothing more than manage the. I saw one the other day. I was approached by a doctor who wanted to sue this guy because the contract provided that the fellow that put together the management company got $10 million as a check if they tried to get rid of him. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, you guys, how did you do this? Well, we're doctors. We were told to sign this contract. It's good for us. Yeah. So there's that kind of thing happening over. People just don't have the slightest idea of how much money is moving between their world of $10 or $15 an hour and the billionaires. There's a big fat middle in there, and it's chewing up the folks that work hard for a living.
One final question. How can we, you and I, help teach Americans about what really is happening to them as their rights are being taken away, whittled down, and access to the courts being eliminated? What can we do?
Well, I have to sort of hang my head on that one because
I mean, the evidence is there.
There's no doubt that
everybody
it's there.
Who's a victim, who's been involved with a lawsuit, realizes it's not right.
I have actually fantasized about winning the lottery and being powerful enough to have some kind of an education program to just teach.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine we're in a society where you can't teach sex education?
Mm-hmm.
I thought knowledge was power.
Yeah.
I didn't think knowledge was anything other than power, but now knowledge is bad sometimes.
Yeah.
I just can't wrap my head around it, and it's only because it suits their purpose. It's not because they're concerned about children. It's because it allows them to have a dogma which is consistent with this greed view. I don't think for one solitary second that abortion and sexual deviancy, if you want to call it that, I don't think they care about it one whit. I don't. I think it's a hot button, and I think it's just used.
I know they don't. You know, they just want the constituency. That's it.
That's all they want, and they can tap into that.
Yeah.
And once they, and it's like anything else. You know, when you're in a cocktail party and you have strike up a conversation, and you find that that person likes football or cars or art, you automatically have an affinity with that person. Why is that? Because you have similar views. And then because you have that similarity of view, it becomes uncomfortable for disagreement, because that's just not, we're human beings. We don't want to go in there and start an argument with somebody you just had a friend with. So you're like, okay, that's fine, I'm going to go with that. So there's a logic to it, and I understand it. I'm not sure, I don't know how to beat it. I know that the only reason why I'm where I am today and why I feel the way I feel is because of what I've seen. I've worked with people who are disadvantaged. I've worked with the poor. I've worked with those people who were accused of taking their road home grants and buying TVs. And no, I don't feel as horribly about them as other folks do. It doesn't mean I think theft is inappropriate, wrong, disgusting, criminal activity is what it is. But we're talking about something different. We're talking about folks who don't possess an understanding of what it takes. For example, to renovate a house. Can you imagine? Your whole life, you live in poverty, and you inherited your mama's house. You've been living there, right under the poverty line. Hurricane comes along, puts 10 feet of water on you, and they give you $50,000, and they tell you, renovate the house. After you've been out of the house for a year and a half, you've had no income, nothing to survive on.
It's not
Fix
fair.
the house.
It's not fair.
It makes no sense. Okay, it's so naive to think that everyone possesses the same ability to even handle money. Okay, you know, far be it from me. I'm not that smart. I don't know what the solution is, but I know that condemning them, and this view that, you know, the wealthy deserve what they have and these people, you know, don't deserve, that's fundamentally incorrect. And as I said, the only logic I can bring to the whole analysis is that I do think that those who are in power, if they want to stay in power, have a responsibility to understand that there are consequences to it, and they are more likely to stay in power if they take care of the folks than they are if they ignore the folks.
They found that to be true in the French Revolution, right?
Yes, indeed.
That is true. Thank you very much for being on our show.
Thank you, my friend.
And this message is going to get out, and we'll be back with you again.
It's always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.